What if the heaviest secrets people carry into old age are not about illness, money, or regret, but about the one moment they thought would never matter again? A moment from 40 years ago. A choice buried so deep that even time stopped asking questions about it. Most people assume that by 80 or 90, the past becomes quieter. But research on aging psychology suggests something very different. Memory does not fade in a straight line. It resurfaces in waves, especially when life slows down and silence gets louder. That is where this story begins. An 89-year-old man, sitting in a quiet room, finally saying something he has never said out loud. He cheated on his wife 40 years ago. She never found out, or at least, he thought she never did. And now, in the final stretch of life, that single memory is not staying buried anymore. To understand why this matters so deeply at this age, you have to understand how the human mind changes across a lifetime. In early adulthood, decisions feel temporary. The brain is wired for reward, novelty, and impulse control is still developing. Neuroscientists studying decision-making at institutions like Stanford and Harvard have long shown that long-term consequence processing is weaker in younger adults, especially under emotional or social pressure. Many choices made in relationships during that stage are not fully processed as permanent identity-shaping events. They are stored as experiences, not identity anchors. But that changes in the 40s. This is when life becomes structured, careers stabilize, families form, identity hardens, and ironically, this is also when unresolved emotional decisions begin to settle deeper into memory. Psychologists studying life review theory and aging found that people naturally begin reorganizing their past as they approach midlife. What once felt small begins to feel significant. What was hidden begins to feel unfinished. But still, daily life stays loud enough to keep memory at a distance. Work, responsibilities, distractions, survival routines. Then comes the shift after 70. This is where aging science becomes very clear. Studies from the National Institute on Aging show that as external stimulation decreases, the brain increases internal recall. In simple terms, when life becomes quieter, memory becomes louder. Not just random memory, but emotionally charged memory, the ones tied to guilt, regret, or unresolved moral tension, and that is when buried experiences begin to resurface with force. The breaking point does not come suddenly. It usually begins with small moments, a thought before sleep, a name remembered unexpectedly, a scene replayed without invitation. For some older adults, these memories become more frequent during periods of isolation or illness. For others, it appears during reflection triggered by aging milestones. And in this man's case, it was silence. Too much of it. No more roles to play, no more distractions to outrun the mind. And suddenly, the past was no longer in the past. The emotional weight of long-held secrets is not just psychological. Research from American geriatric psychiatry journals has shown that unresolved guilt and chronic emotional stress can contribute to sleep disruption, elevated cortisol levels, and even cardiovascular strain in older adults. The body does not fully separate emotional memory from physical health, even decades later. But the real fallout is not always physical. It is relational. Because even when a secret is never discovered, the person carrying it changes. Subtly at first, emotional distance, irritability, overcompensation in other areas of life. Some individuals become overly protective, others overly distant. Psychologists refer to this as moral residue, the lingering emotional imprint of actions that conflict with personal values. Over time, it shapes identity. And in long marriages, even unspoken truths can influence behavior in ways neither partner fully understands. That leads to one of the most difficult questions in aging relationships. Does silence protect love, or slowly reshape it? Many older adults assume that if a mistake was never discovered, it had no consequence. But memory science suggests otherwise. The brain does not require external discovery to maintain internal tension. It only requires awareness of contradiction between action and identity. That contradiction does not disappear with age. It deepens. And then comes the failed coping strategies. people try to bury it deeper, rationalize it, reframe it as a different time. Some rely on spiritual justification, others avoid thinking about it entirely. But research on long-term emotional suppression shows that avoidance does not erase emotional memory. It delays processing, often making the memory more intrusive later in life, which is why many seniors experience a strange pattern. The older they get, the more certain memories demand attention. Not because the past has changed, but because their capacity to ignore it has. Now here is the part most people do not expect: this kind of late life reflection is extremely common. Life review studies show that a majority of older adults engage in deep reflection about past relationships, moral decisions, and identity-shaping moments. Not all of it is negative. In fact, many report finding peace through reflection. But unresolved guilt behaves differently. It does not simply fade into acceptance. It demands reconciliation, sometimes internally, sometimes verbally, sometimes never fully resolved at all. So what does a moment like this really mean after 40 years? It is not just about cheating. It is about how the mind carries unfinished emotional business across decades, how identity absorbs choices made in youth, and how aging removes the noise that once kept those memories quiet. In other words, old age does not erase the past. It reveals it. And for many people, that is the most unexpected part of aging. Nobody warns them about. So, what can be done with this understanding today? First, acknowledge that memory is not static. The way you interpret your past will continue to evolve as you age. Avoid pretending earlier actions are emotionally irrelevant just because time has passed. Second, if there are unresolved emotional burdens, address them while life is still active and connected. That may mean conversation, writing, reflection, or guided support. Aging research consistently shows that emotional processing improves well-being, even late in life. Third, focus on integrity in present relationships, not perfection, but alignment between values and actions today. Because the strongest predictor of peace in later years is not a flawless past, but an honest present. And here is the warning researchers quietly emphasize: suppressed emotional guilt does not disappear with age. It often becomes more vivid when external distractions fade. But there is one final thought worth sitting with. If memory becomes clearer in old age, not weaker, then what else about the past might still be waiting to be fully understood? If this story made you reflect, take a moment to like and share it with someone who values honest conversations about life and aging. And in the comments, share this: do you believe people ever fully outgrow their past, or just learn to live alongside it? Subscribe for the next chapter, where we explore what long life really does to memory, truth, and identity when nothing is left to distract the mind anymore.